Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining today. My name is Tammy Zimmel, and I'm the VP of Marketing. Today, Joe Pettit, who I'm sure a lot of you already know him, he's our Senior Training Support Specialist, and he'll be covering the top questions we get when users have moved from version 10 to 12. For those of you who don't know, Joe has worked at the Estimating Edge for 29 years and has trained over 1,000 estimators on the Edge, and we really consider him one of our experts here. Before we get started, we have a couple of housekeeping items. All lines have been muted, but we encourage you to ask questions. So to ask a question, all you do is just enter your question in the question/chat window, and at the end, Joe then will answer those questions. And then later on today, we're going to send you an email that has a recorded link and a 3-question survey. And I really encourage all of you to answer that survey because it helps us make sure we're delivering the right type of content, the right topics, the subjects, and we just want to make sure that we're making the most use of your time. And then lastly, next month, we're going to have 2 more webinars and a separate email will be sent out. So since space is limited, attendance is on a first-come basis, so be sure to sign up for those webinars coming up in April. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Joe.
Thank you, Tammy. Let's take a look at the screen layout before we really get going here. Over here on the upper left-hand side is where I can tell the Edge how to connect. Right now I'm connected through the cloud on my program. Here's my menu with various menu options. Here's my breadcrumb. The breadcrumbs, instead of tabs, are what we will use in version 12 to navigate through the program, a combination of the breadcrumbs and the white and blue arrow that you see here. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll come over here and click New Bid, and I'll type in the bid name. Notice my name already entered in as the estimator. That's because when I signed in, the Edge noted that. I can change that to one of the other estimators in my organization, or I can leave it that way. Now in version 10, at this point, you would create your bid and then go into your image manager and then have to create pages. We can do all of that right from here by clicking the Add Images button. This takes me to the electronic plans that are in my computer. I have to have them in my computer already. And then I can click here and go ahead and find the particular images I want. Like version 10, I can hold my control key down and click individual drawings, or I can hold my shift key down and click a block of drawings. When I click open, they come into my project. Now to get one of these drawings or more to be a page that I'm going to measure, I preview it here, and then I come over and click Add Page. By the way, that's the same as coming over here and clicking this little checkbox here. That will also add the page without me even previewing it. Right now, I just need this one page in here, so I'll leave that. So when I click Continue at the bottom, all 3 pages will be part of my estimate, but all 3 drawings will be part of my estimate, but the only one that has a page associated with it will be drawing number 1. I click Continue, and it goes ahead and brings that in, and it opens up my Scenarios breadcrumb. Unlike version 6 where we jump to the Pages tab, here we're staying on Scenarios, and I'll work my way to the pages. Actually, I'll work my way to the Conditions breadcrumb by clicking my white and blue arrow. Now let's just go over those breadcrumbs a little bit. The breadcrumbs on the left-hand side moving to the right are for my job. The ones on the right moving toward the left are for my database. So I am on the Conditions breadcrumb for the page called Roof Drawing Number 1. I'm on the page for Section 1, the section for Scenario 1, and the scenario for the job called Webinar 1. So this is where you'll see your job name appear on your breadcrumbs. let's go ahead and add some conditions. I come over here and I click Add Condition, and it brings up a list from my group database. At this point, I can't edit the database. All I can do is select things. So I come down here to my single ply groups, and I select my TPO group. The list in the middle is what's in my group. I can select individual conditions and just bring them in to a page, or I can add all of them to the page. The ones on the right-hand side are the ones that are going to go into my estimate. I click Add to Page, and it brings them in. I would encourage you, if you haven't already done it, to get the latest version of our software because it moves a little bit faster when it comes to this. All right, so now I'm looking at my list of conditions. To edit any one of those, although I could double-click, I prefer using this Edit button over here, the little pencil with the notepad. The Edit pencil button works the same way all the time. The double-click does different things in different parts of the program. So you're safer, if you want it to work the same way all the time, to click your little Edit button. You will see that the condition properties, although it looks a little different, it's basically set up very similar to what you had in version 10. So the fields haven't changed around hardly at all. So that'll be pretty easy for you to work with. Right now, we're not going to make any changes to it. I'm just going to move on to step 2. So steps 1 and 2, I'm going to use my blue and white arrow for. Now, I could just as easily click the takeoff button, and whichever condition I happen to be sitting on, it will take me out to that. I kind of like hitting that white and blue button instead. Notice I did that on the curve flashing, so it comes out to the curve flashing. By the way, the Edge is designed to use 2 screens, but for now I'm using one screen so that you can see how all that works easily on yours. And this will be the way you can do it if you have one screen when you're working with it instead of 2. I'll go back up to the mechanically attached TPO, click my white and blue arrow, and I'm now back out to my drawing screen. I'm ready to measure, except I haven't given it a scale yet. We don't have our toolbar icons at the top. We have them on the side here, and I won't see them until I give the program a scale. To do that, I come down here and click the Scale button. I tell it I want to calculate the scale, and I touch down the endpoints of a known dimension. And then I tell it what that dimension is. It says 1 inch equals 4 feet. Sometimes it'll say 1 inch equals 4.01 feet or something very close. If it's extremely close to it, you can click the drop down and just choose a typical way to show the scale. If it's different, then you might want to leave it that way. All right, so now I'm ready to measure. My toolbar buttons have lit up over here. I've got drawing properties showing up over here, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. I've got Snap To, and I've got Ortho turned on. One of the differences, you see how it's sort of filling things in as I go. Another difference is we now use our Ortho in 45-degree increments instead of 90-degree increments, which is pretty cool. The backspace key works the same way as it did in version 10. I click the backspace key to get rid of the last point that I measured. When I think I'm done, I right-click and hit End Shape, and in Area, it closes for me. Now I can move on to another condition. Although I can click over here on what I want, I can hit the N for Next or P for Previous, like I could in version 10. So I'll click the N button on my keyboard. That moves me right down to the next measurable condition, which is my wall flashing. Now I walk around and put some wall flashing on. When I want to stop, I right-click and hit End Shape. I can also stop by just clicking the Enter button. Both does the same thing. Now, if I want to make the line thicker, instead of going into drawing properties like I used to before, I can just make that line thicker. I can also change the color of it here. I'm going to set this thing up so that we can see all the colors I'm measuring at the same time. So I'll come over here and click the gray non-current so that we see everything. And then I'll go ahead and click on my curve flashing and measure it. Once I measure one curve, if I have a number of them that are the same size, I can click my replicate button and add that in. If I click back on length again, I can go ahead and do a different sized curve. Once again, once I complete that, I can hit my replicate button and I can add other ones in. If I add more than I wanted to, I could come up here and click select and select individual ones to get rid of them, but an easier way to do that now is to hit my undo button, and that takes out the last thing that I did. If I take out too many, I can hit the redo button to get it back. Before we leave the drawing screen, I just want to point out a couple other nice things here. Now I've got this add replicate still on, so I'll hit escape once to get rid of that. Notice these are my drawing properties. The ones that are green are what's activated right now. The ones that are brown are not activated. I can, by the way, I can click auto pan, and then as I am measuring, I'm using my scroll wheel, by the way, to go back and forth. As I'm measuring with auto pan, let me go ahead and get into a measure mode. You can see that the drawing is going back and forth or up and down. It will pan for me automatically in auto pan. I can use my scroll wheel to zoom out or to zoom in one way or the other. I can backspace that out. I'll shut auto pan off for now. Here's another feature that we have. I'm in X-ray mode right now, so that means you can see through the area that I measured. But notice I can't see through the line. I'm only seeing through the area. To see through the line also, I come over to my X-ray button and click it a second time, and it gets a little brighter. Now it's in double X-ray mode. Now as I roll over this, I can see right on through, similar to the bleed through that we had before. If I wanted that to be larger, I could click my HUD, my heads-up display, and now I get a larger view of that where I can move around and do things. We still have some of the shortcut keys that we had before, like 2 to shrink everything back down, or 1, which is, by the way, the same as clicking over here, zoom to a particular area, to move around my screen. If I wanted to go ahead and put an arc in here, I can go ahead and start to measure and click the convert to arc icon. Now when I first click that, it doesn't change to an arc, but when I get off this margin and back onto the drawing screen, that's when you see it. And then I can end that shape. I'll go ahead and undo that. And I'm going to roll back to my condition list now by clicking the X up here at the top. Now I'm back at my condition list. I've got a number of things that are red. These are things that I haven't measured. So I'll go ahead and turn them off by selecting them all and clicking the off button. Now I'm ready to do my next step. The next 4 steps are right here on my toolbar screen, right at the top. Pricing, labor, recap, and reports. I click on my pricing button, and I'm out to my pricing screen. You'll notice a status bar over here on the left. The things that are green, the items that are in green, are the items that the Edge is satisfied with as far as all the information it needs. The ones that are red have issues. If I click on a single occurrence line that is red, I can look over here on the right margin, and it will tell me what condition this came from, and what page it came from, and what my problem is. I have a unit price missing. If I have a multiple occurrence item that's red, when I click on that, it only shows me the common information to all the occurrences over here. If I needed to see each occurrence, we do not have a detail tab. Instead, I just double click on this line and it shows me all the places that this item is occurring in my job. To get back off this, I just hit the X. Now to go ahead and put my prices in, I'll click on my unit price column, put them in, and I can write down there. If you see a lot of digits appear, just ignore it and just type right over it. It works just fine. All right, so I've gone ahead and cleared all my prices so that everything is green over here. A couple other things to comment on and point out is I can add or remove columns from this pricing screen now. I've got the occurrences column appearing. If you don't have that, you want to make sure you've got that. So you click the columns button and make sure that little pound button is checked off. Let's say I wanted to add waste percent to this. I can click waste percent and now my waste percent column appears. I can come over here and add a waste percent for any or all of my items. If I want to get rid of that column again, I just come over here, click the waste percent again, and it's gone. We still have a lot of nice features like we did in version 10, like the pricing wizard or replace tilde codes. We now have an icon for that one. Rounding is a little bit different. It does not auto round until you mark things. So if I want everything auto rounded, I go ahead and select everything, and then I hit my round button, and it rounds all my order quantities up. It will only round what's auto round enabled is set for, so some of the general conditions things may or may not round according to how you have them set. All right, so now we're going to move to labor. To do that, I just click the labor icon here, and very similar to what you had before where things will back calculate according to what column you enter things in and all that kind of stuff. You can go ahead and just put numbers in. Here's one thing I want to point out that can kind of get you confused if you're not careful. If I click on one of these headings and I actually click it, the edge is reordering this column in that order. And that means if I come over here and I put a 3 in this, that tear off is going to jump up to the top of my screen. That gets real confusing if you do that and things are jumping around on you. So if you don't want that to happen, either don't click up there or click on something you care about having the order, whether it's the description or what I like is the user code. I click on the user code so that it stays in some sort of logical order to me. And now as I'm making changes here, the items aren't rearranging themselves automatically. All right, so that's my labor screen. Now we go to our recap screen. The recap screen has a very similar format than we had before. If I want to change a profit percent or an overhead percent, I just get on it, double click on the line, change it to whatever I want, and click out of it. And now it goes ahead and it updates my screen accordingly. If I want to see any given tax class expanded so that I can see the different parts that are in there, I can do that, or I can expand them all, or unexpand them all. One neat feature that we did not have in version 10 is the ability now to put additional markups in after the bond. Occasionally we ran into people who wanted to do that, and now you can do that. Notice also over on the right-hand side, it's showing me whatever subdivisions I've got on this job. Right now, I only have one for roofing. It shows up there, and it shows up at the upper left-hand corner. So that's my recap screen. Now I'm going to move to reports. To do that, I click this icon here. It takes me to my reports screen, and I can see this in a few different modes. If it's just like this where I see one screen, I can run a report just by clicking the little arrow. and it runs that report. We now have the ability to add an icon, or I'm sorry, a logo to the top of the report. So if you've got that set in your preferences, you can see that. If I wanted this report to be exported to Excel, I can just click this and export it to Excel or Word or a PDF very easily. Now, what if I've got a few reports that are favorites that I like to use over and over again? I like to put them in a separate column. To do that, I use this little star, and in whatever order I check them, that's the order they will appear. So I click this, the recap, and the drawing report, and maybe a stocking report, and they all appear over on my left-hand margin here. This makes it easier, and this will save this way so that when I come into another job, those preset reports show up over there. In whatever order I click these is the order they will print in. By the way, drawing report now has the ability to be previewed, unlike version 10. So you can do that. But if I click this report first, and then that, and then that, and that, that is the order they will print in. I can print them all to the printer at the same time. If I want them to all be in one PDF, I click Generate PDF and tell it the name and where that's going to go. And that way, they all become part of one PDF. So that's the basic 6 steps. There are a couple other things I wanted to point out to you, though. So I'm going to come back to the condition list and just mention a few things back here. First of all, up here at the upper right-hand corner of the screen allows you to get to help in our program. If you click this little help button, it takes you to our support center. I'll drag that screen over so you can see it. And if you wanted to review any additional videos, you could click any one of these and click on it and go ahead and run the video. If you double click on that video while it's running, it will take up your full screen. And we've got videos to cover the full 6 steps and a few other things out there. So I would encourage you to look at those at your own convenience. Another thing is this little gear up here at the top of the screen. This is where we can access your company portal. When you click this, now you get your company portal appearing. This is where you can do things like add users, change their roles, or download the latest version of the program. So those are just a couple other things I wanted to mention. And one last thing before I turn it back to Tammy is if you go to close out of the program and you get this message, that's telling you that you've got one or more scenarios that have not been checked in. That means that scenario is only on your computer, and if you change out computers or you go to the hotel to try to finish that bid, forget it. It's not going to be there. So what you want to do is make sure before you close out of the program at the end of the day that you check in all the scenarios that you've been working with. To do that, I go back to scenarios, I click the check-in button, and I check it in. Now that I've got that one checked in and I don't have any others checked out, when I click the X, it takes me out of the program. All right, take it away, Tammy.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you everybody who attended today. We appreciate your time, and we hope that this was helpful. Just to recap, marketing, I'll be sending out an email later on today with the recorded link and a 3-question survey. And moving forward for the rest of this year, we're going to have regular webinars. So we want to make sure that our topics are on point and something that would be of value. So please be sure to answer that 3-question survey on any topics you want to see up and coming. And I think that is it. If you have any other questions, I'm just going to pause and see if there's anybody in the chat. If they want to ask any questions directly to Joe, just type that into the chat. Otherwise, we will end it for today, and thank you again.
No questions. I think it's because
Joe, we have one question. Jason has asked, are we able to view other plans of the job on a separate screen? Example, view the takeoff page and another plan with details.
I'm sorry, could you say that question again, please?
Sure. Are we able to view other plans of the job on a separate screen? Example, view the takeoff page and another plan with details.
We can look at another plan with details, but we cannot measure two jobs at the same time. You can only measure one job at a time.
Okay, the next question is from Tony. Can you please explain the hyperlink feature?
I can, except at the moment I'm having a technical difficulty and I can't see my screen properly here.
Give us a couple seconds, we apologize.
Sorry about that. It was my faux pas there. Here we are. What was that question again, Tammy?
So Tony asked, could you please explain the hyperlink feature?
All right. The hyperlink feature allows you to take an image from another drawing and attach that to your drawing screen. So as soon as my job opens up here, I'll go ahead and show you how that thing works. Now, I don't have any drawing details in the particular one that I had, so let me go ahead and add something. Let's say I was out here and I wanted to, we'll do a couple different things here. I wanted to add another drawing to my project. I can come up here and click Import Images, and then come over here and pick anything that I want to import. So if I had a particular detail that I wanted to import, or a particular page, I can go ahead and add that, and I'll just click Continue here. That becomes part of my project. So now let's say I wanted that to show up for my wall flashing. I'll click the hyperlink button, the image hyperlink, and over here a box appears. I come over here and I hit the drop down and select the page that I want and click Apply, and then roll back over here and click down wherever I want that hyperlink to appear. And there it is. Now to see that hyperlink, while I'm on this condition, I click the Select tool, and then I double click it. And there it is. Since you asked that question, there's other things I can do here. Let's say I just wanted this piece of that to show up. in my image viewer, I could crop that image and call it parapet or whatever I want to call it. And there it is as one of the additional images in my project. Now, where does that go? I'm out here at my drawing screen. I click my image hyperlink, and now that cropped image appears here, and I can select that and add that now also. Now if I select it, it appears on my screen. All right, any other questions?
Yes, Brian has a question. Could you show once again where we add additional markup?
Additional markups. Well, if I'm out at my recap screen and I need just an additional markup for something like a labor, maybe or maybe here up in material, I want to add an additional markup in here. All I have to do is click on material, and right here shows my markups. I click add, and I just say inflation. And I go ahead and put in whatever percentage I want. And I click save and save again. And that was one that I added to a particular cost type so that it shows up directly under material. That's different than adding it below the bond. Let's say I came down here and I wanted to mark up below the bond for a commission or something like that. I can double click on this, and then I come over here to the right, and underneath bond there's a box that says markups. I click that, I hit add, and call it whatever I want. And now commission appears underneath my bond on the job. All right, what else?
Okay, Allison has a question. Would you explain more about the check-in, check-out?
All right, great, good question. All right, now when you go to the library and you check out a book, you have that book and no one else can read it until you check it back in. The check-in, check-out concept is the same. When I am working on this scenario is in the hard drive of my computer. The only thing on the cloud is whatever was on the cloud before I checked it out, like if it's a job that's been going on for a few days. But it's still on the hard drive of my computer, and if someone else needs to look at that, or I leave at the end of the day and go home and want to work on that at home, and I'm on a different computer, I'm not going to see that information because it's on the computer in the office. So I need to check that in just like I would check in a book at the library. Once I check that in, it goes back up to my cloud. And now anyone in my company who has access to that can check it out and make other changes to it. Or I can go home, check it out, and work on it at home, and then check it back in afterwards. Any other questions?
Brian has a question. When you add the hyperlink, can you make measurements on that screen for, say, coping metal?
Not at this point. At this point, we can't measure anything that's in that the image handler button window. We can't measure those yet. There's some discussion about those kinds of things for future wishes. Any other questions?
We have some other questions, but they're longer than a couple seconds. So I think what we'll do is we will follow up with each of you who have additional questions individually. and that way we can give you the specific details and spend the time needed to show you each of those things that you're asking. Oh, we have one more question here from Will. Can you review the use of the mirror image button?
Mirror image button, sure. All right, so I'm out here. Now this is, oh, I better check. Now that's another interesting point. I didn't check this job out, notice, and I hit this arrow, and my scenario is gray. Okay, so that means I'm in review mode only. I can look, but I can't make any changes. If I want to make any changes to this, I better check this job out before I make any changes to it. So let's say I've got, this is probably a bad example. I'm trying to think of something that might be a better example. All right, I'll just go ahead and turn my walk pads on for a second and come out here and measure some walk pads. All right, so I go ahead and I measure some of my walk pad here. Now, normally you wouldn't just use this. You would use this when you have a lot of the same thing, but it flips over. So I'm just going to kind of show you how it works with this, even though it doesn't make as much sense in this particular situation. So I end that shape. Now, let's say I've got another one of these things. So what I can do with this, first thing, I can just flip this if I wanted to. And to do that, I have to select that object, and then I can either flip it this way. Every time I click this, it flips it a different way. You notice that? Then it flips it the other way and back, or this way. Now, I was training a drywall customer the other day, and they had, this was, if you would imagine, a wall type, and they had a bunch of those within a particular floor that were the same direction. So what he did is he put it in replicate and just added another one over here and went ahead and flipped that in the direction he wanted it. And then he put it back in replicate and put them wherever he wanted them. So that's what the mirror image is all about. Any other questions?
Allison has a question, and it's, do we have to check in a job at the end of the day or just close the job?
I highly recommend that if you're leaving your computer for more than an hour, you check that job in. What happens if you go to lunch and you have a major meltdown in your office and your computer fries or something like that? I know it's a pretty rare thing to have something like that happen, but if you check that job in, now you've got it in the cloud as well as on your hard drive. So if you're leaving your computer for any length of time, you're better off checking it in. Now, the very first time you do that, if you've got a lot of electronic plans there, it'll take a little bit longer. But after that, it will move pretty quick. So you really want to get used to checking that in. I ran into a guy the other day who did not check in any of his jobs, and then he changed computers. And then he wanted to access those jobs, and he couldn't. That's an awful, unfun support call to take.
Joe, we have two questions that are kind of related to that, and is, does the Edge auto back up after 5 minutes, and is there a way to auto check in every half hour or so?
Great questions. There is not a way currently to auto check in. If that is something that you think we need, feel free to shoot us a note on that, and we can talk with the development team regarding that. Regarding the auto backup, there is an auto backup, but it's not the same as it was in version 10. So it works a little differently. It's backing up, I don't remember the exact sequence, but it's like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 1 hour, and a day or something like that. And you don't see that as easily as you did in version 10. It's a little bit different. If I were to come back out here, now I've been working with this thing for a little while. So let's say I did something I shouldn't do, like I deleted a page out of this. Of course, I've only got one page in it, so it probably wouldn't be the best thing to do. But if I did delete a page out of here, I could come back to my scenario, and usually you do this with a support call. This is one of those don't try this at home things. You click this little blue button next to scenarios, and you can see that there's different backups of this scenario. And you can see that some of them have a larger number than others. Okay, so these are different backups that are taking place at different time increments on this particular scenario that I'm at. So that's the hidden backup that is in there. So if you run into a situation where you need something like that, please do give us a call. But if the problem is you've changed out computers and you haven't checked it back in, you're kind of out of luck unless you can get a hold of that other computer. Anything else?
Joe, can you maybe go over the benefits of, like, from the user perspective? I would think that you'd want to save every 5 minutes because I want to save my work and not have to do extra work. But obviously, that's not always the optimal case because it makes your computer run. Can you maybe kind of go into details of the best practices for what options to choose with timing of backing up?
Well, you don't have any control over the timing of the backup. It just does that automatically. Now, let me try something that I really haven't tried lately, and that is I just hit Save Changes, and then I come back into my backups here, and I see I'm at 141, and I see that what it did do is it did save the current changes of my scenario right there. So I could do that occasionally just by hitting that little disk on my scenario button, on my scenario breadcrumb. However, the Edge is automatically doing backups. As long as you're moving from screen to screen in your estimate, it's automatically doing those backups. It's just not, I think the first one is 10 minutes. It's not 5 minutes like it was before.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then Tony has a question. Can you show how to copy and insert a page or scenario?
Sure. That's basically if you wanted to do a copy and insert, you just click copy and insert over here. Now, the copy and insert is a little different than it was before. Before, it always came up this way. But in this version of the Edge, if I check certain copy and insert options, and the next time I do a copy and insert, it will remember what I did the last time, and it will ask for those same options the next time. I believe that will even work if I'm in here and I want another page. I hit copy and insert. Notice it saved it the way I last did it. This time I'm going to copy only measured quantities, which automatically copies my colors, and I'll call it roof 2. All right. So now if I do another copy and insert, it leaves the options the last way I did it. So that's what's going on there. Now that's the regular copy and insert. We also have a way to copy a page and put it on another scenario. That's a little different. I right click on that and hit copy. And then I move back to you move one level up from where you want to paste it, and then you paste. And you check your options the way you want, and it will allow you to do that, but it'll make you change the names of it if they're in there already. So now I've got a couple of them. But then again, that was a lot easier just to do a copy and insert than doing all that other stuff. And then the last thing along those lines is some people want to copy a bunch of conditions from one page to another. You can do that a couple different ways. You can mark those conditions and then right click and hit copy. You can also use the Windows shortcut key for Control C for copy. And then you can come one level up, get on the page you want, right-click and hit Paste Conditions, and pop them in there. You do have another option, but it's only on the condition list, and that is you can use the Control-C, Control-V. So I could be down here, and I have to actually click on one of my conditions to be down in the body of this, and use my Control-V and paste them in that way. Any other questions?
Yes, Jason has a question. Do we still have the condition tree?
The condition tree is what you see when you're out at the drawing screen, but you do not see the condition tree when you're here in the job. It's a good question. I now have a number of pages here so that while I'm rolling through this and I happen to be out at my drawing screen, when I'm out here, well, I guess I went out, oh, there we go. I can see that I've got multiple pages here, and I can click on any one of these and look at the conditions in that page and literally jump to that drawing screen just by clicking a particular condition. So I can do that, but it's all done at the drawing screen level instead of the condition level like it was before. If I wanted to automatically, or I wanted to all of a sudden draw something in Roof Drawing 1, I could come up here and expand my conditions and select whatever it was I wanted to measure off of. Give it a few seconds to change screens, and away I go. Great question. Anything else?
Brian asked, can you open 2 jobs at the same time?
The answer is no. You cannot open 2 jobs at the same time. It only allows you to open 1 job at a time.
Well, that wraps up all the questions. Great questions, everybody. I'll send the email and also include a link to, and for those of you that have more in-depth questions, somebody's going to be reaching out to you today. And then if you have any other questions, I'll send an email that you can respond back to us. And then just again, next month, we're going to be doing a couple other webinars based on some topics that are some of the frequently asked questions within version 12 too. So we appreciate all your time and thank you so much for attending. Thank you, Joe, and this concludes the webinar.
All right, thank you, Tammy.